brutal truth was we had 4 months worth of mortgage payments and car payments and beans on toast money saved up in an account, and it just went like, and in about 2.5 days we're off 75% of our income.
Wow. Okay.
We decided to go down swinging.
Hello and welcome to the We Built This Business podcast, the place for UK entrepreneurs and business owners who want to build a multi-million-pound business. I'm Daniel O'Sullivan, founder of Red Campus Events, Team Building Experiences and Shizoo Media. In this episode, I'm speaking with Richard Few, the founder of Sales Geek. Richard is a born risk taker and is taking Sales Geek global. It hasn't all been plain sailing, however. Let's head over to the podcast. Today, I'm pleased to have Richard Few on the We Built This Business podcast, talking about his company, Sales Geek. Richard, nice to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Daniel.
So, Richard, if I could start just by asking about Sales Geek itself, what is Sales Geek today?
Yeah, so Sales Geek today is the world's largest provider of part-time sales directors to small businesses. So kind of our footprint now is over 50 geeks across 5 different continents, servicing thousands of businesses as we sit here today.
So you're global, essentially. You're not just based in the UK.
Yeah, so that's changed quite a bit over the last year. So we were doing this 15 months ago. We were just in the UK, but in the last 15 months, we've launched into 14 states, the US. We are now in India, and we're now in the GCC region as well.
Fantastic. So from what I understand, you're a franchise model.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit? So you said you've got 50 sales geeks. Are they all franchises or are they employees of the company?
Yeah, so that 50 is our franchise partners. We have a HQ team here as well that support those franchises. They need a lot from us, and part of our deal with them is the support that they get from us. So for those 50, it's actually probably a smidge more than that, because some of our franchisees have team members as well. So part of our model is that people don't just buy the franchise to be self-employed. They buy the franchise to go and grow a business. And we have a number of those franchisees now that are employing people and taking people on. So the actual number of people that kind of wear the logo is probably near a sort of 70 to 75.
Okay. So the Sales Geek itself, so just explain it to me in layman's terms. So you said a part-time sales director. So do you sit alongside a board within a business? How does it work?
Yeah, so we do. So the service is called Your Sales Director. So that's our kind of our primary service. We also deliver sales training both to small and large companies. We've been really quite privileged to work with some of the biggest sales employers in the world and been collect some pretty cool logos. But actually, the real heroes and champions of our business is the small business owners. And I guess kind of 8 years ago when I was planning this, what I became acutely aware of is that the failure rates in startups are pretty high. The two primary reasons are cash and competency, and found out that 80% of businesses are owned by people that don't have the same experience that me and my team have. And we felt that if we could lower the barrier to entry for that founder, that small business owner, being able to acquire a sales director into their business, that maybe we can help people sort of defy those odds.
I love that. The failure rate in small businesses is, like you said, it's really high. I can't remember the exact stats, but it's something like 80% don't make the first 5 years, or it may even be 3 years, I think. So let's go back, Richard, to the very beginning. So when you left school, what happened from there to take you to Sales Geek?
Yeah, so I was an early school leaver. I left school at 16, and I left school at 16 because from the age of probably 13, all I was going to do was be a professional golfer when I left school. So I wanted to get out of school as quick as I could. I wasn't very academic at school, and I was going to play golf for a living. And I realized after 2 years of pursuing that post school that I was too far off of being able to make a living out of playing, and didn't really fancy the career as a club pro. I'd worked in the pro shop at the golf club since I was 12 or 13 years old, kind of probably where I probably learned to sell, actually, unknowingly at the time, and had some targets and had things to achieve there. Never saw it as that. It was just fun, as it should be. And yeah, I guess like most people at that point, I ended up in sales, and most people that you speak to in sales, well, almost all people you speak to in sales, like me, probably never told the careers officer at school that that was what they were intending to do. We all kind of got there because something else didn't work out, or we got an internal promotion that we didn't really want, and we ended up in sales. So, yeah, my first, I suppose, proper kind of an inverted commas sales job was actually in the motor trade. So I grew up the son of a mechanic. I grew up around cars, and a member of the golf club that I was working at the time said, "Do you want to? Why don't you come and sell some cars?" And I was like, "That sounds great." And I didn't know at that point the reputation of car salesmen, along with the double glazing guys and a few other um, parts of the sales world that have the sort of the dirty word associated to it. So I did. So at 18 years old, I was in a Nissan dealership in Northeast London. Probably the youngest sales guy by half in terms of age. The next newest guy was probably 40 years old. Learning how to sell at the absolute coal face in front end of sales. And I think the some of those sales environments get a bad rep, but I learned more in that B2C sales environment for the 2 or 3 years I was in it than I did in my B2B career. But kind of knew how that world was viewed, and I wanted to get into a sort of a professional B2B sales role. And after quite a long time of applying, Daniel, so I'm sure you can probably imagine, as a 16-year-old school leaver that had spent a bit of time playing golf and a bit of time selling secondhand cars, trying to get a B2B sales role in a proper organization was not easy.
Yeah.
But yeah, an opportune moment. I bumped into a guy who just invested in the business that was looking to build a sales team on a flight. Actually, I was on an EasyJet flight. I sat next to this guy, and
Well,
yeah,
so you met him on the flight. You didn't meet him before then.
no, I met him on the flight. We were chatting for an hour and a half on this flight, and as we got off the flight, he just gave me his business card and said, "Look, we're looking to recruit some sales guys." And at that point, I probably had a year of not even being able to get an interview with anyone because of I think when you're in your early 20s, like a lot of businesses are transfixed on graduate sales recruitment rather than recruiting sales guys maybe that didn't go that route. So yeah, got that opportunity, and I guess sort of didn't really look back then over the next kind of 10 years, and I suppose at 32 found myself as a global sales director for a $300 million North American PLC, and I was kind of
Wow.
doing well in my career. I had a good sort of rise through the sales ranks. Really had a couple of sales leadership roles, and yeah, I was in my dream job. And then 6 months into starting that dream job, I started to plan to leave it and start doing this.
So what obviously dream and job, don't often go together, and
Yeah,
securing that as well.
yeah.
So what was the reason for 6 months in that you decided that you were going to plan to go elsewhere, or plan to start your own? Sorry.
Yeah, I think the if I kind of rewind back to the sort of the 18-year-old version of me who was sort of like staring down the barrel of walking away from professional career in sport, which is what I always wanted to do. And I thought, I grew up in a working class family in a working class area of the UK. And I guess I always saw golf and professional sport as my route out of that. And then it became sales, really. I guess as I got into sales, I suppose you'd look at those guys and those with those big job titles that were the stock options and the big bonuses and traveling around the world and go, "Oh, I want some of that. That's going to afford me all the things that I want." And and to be fair, it did for it provided a good quality of living for me and my family, and we've got to see and do lots of things. But yeah, I guess 6 months into that job, like you say, I think the reality of working in a big corporate environment just didn't sit with me. I'm not into sort of internal politics. I don't really like kind of the playing not to lose mindset. I'm more of a playing to win guy, and I kind of embrace mistakes, but they're not very tolerated
Yeah.
in those environments. Yeah, I guess a lot of it was instinct as well, I guess, Daniel, really, which was I knew pretty quickly that I didn't fit in.
Do you think that was the kind of entrepreneur inside of you, the wanting to fail? And no one wants to fail, but you know what I mean? Like, you want to test the market, you want to test what you're doing. And like you said, a corporate environment is very restrictive. You're
Yeah, it
giving a
is.
very slither of what you're allowed to do. And
Yeah.
that was what the reason ultimately that was like forcing you out.
Yeah, I think there's a few things really. I think I'd always wanted to do my own thing, but got way better at finding excuses not to do it rather than doing it. So procrastinated on that a bit.
Hmm.
And I guess the things that got me over the line was, I think, again, in a lot of these, and it's not just PLCs. I think there's a lot of privately owned businesses now that are PE funded, and they're very short term in their approach, and it's very transactional now. It's about this month and this quarter, and I think for me, I don't like that. I don't, and I guess as a sales leader, particularly, it's not too far away from soccer management, really, in terms of, you can be a hero for a couple of years, but you're a couple of poor quarters away from being out of work, and that, from a personal perspective, that creates a bit of anxiety and a bit of stress. So you're a single income
Yeah.
family, and you're seeing people around you get fired that have been there for 2 or 3 years doing a decent job, and it's kind of all of that kind of sort of toxic pot, which I know the word toxic's kind of probably overused these days. But yeah, just kind of what wasn't for me. And I think I don't mind admitting that I'd already started to deliberately become a slight version of myself to survive in that world. And I suppose I got to a point where I didn't want to do it. It's quite exhausting being two different people. Yeah, I didn't want to do it anymore.
So when you started Sales Geek, how did you transition from that dream job to Sales Geek starting?
So I started the business in February 2017. So I celebrate the 7th of February every year as my kind of Independence Day. But I started that process probably back in the August, and like anything, it started with a conversation with a friend. I met a friend for a coffee. I was down in London working, and I met a good friend of mine called Paul Friedman for a coffee. And I think my opening line to Paul was, "This is the crossroads I find myself at, and I can either find a way to develop the skills and the way to survive in this environment and kind of leverage it for everything it's worth, or now's the time to break away. But here's a list of reasons why I probably can't do that." And he was great. He just said, like, you can't live the rest of your life in an environment that you don't belong in. So find a way out. So I spent a few months planning it. It wasn't a particularly long process. The initial business model for Sales Geek could have fit on one side of a sheet of paper. It wasn't a very complicated model.
Yeah.
And I guess really the transition was just, I suppose, having the freedom and the independence was amazing. It's also scary at the same time, because you spend a career with people sort of broadly telling you what to do, or here's the parameters to go and do what you're doing. And now you've got infinite possibilities, but you've also got infinite things you can go and do, and you've got to invest your time really wisely. And I guess the brutal truth was, we had 4 months worth of mortgage payments and car payments and beans on toast money saved up in an account. And if it got to 4 months and 1 week, and we didn't have income coming in, then I was going back to work. But I'd already told my wife that I wouldn't be going back to doing what I used to do. I'd be finding a different career, and we might have to adjust accordingly to that. So I guess probably the best thing I ever did, Daniel, was probably about burning the boats, as they say. And I pulled the drawbridge up and said, I'm never going back there. So therefore there was no plan B. It was just kind of, how do we make plan A happen?
That's what, and there's a famous speech by Arnold Schwarzenegger you may have seen, I don't know, and it's about, don't have a plan B.
Yeah.
Because if you have a plan B, you will end up going to that plan B. You have to make all of your resources go into plan A. Otherwise, it's too easy to just go, this isn't going to work, and just fall back into where you were. So you started Sales Geek, and where did the name come from? Because it's a great name, and I was intrigued.
So the name's an interesting story, actually. So the name is older than the business. So I registered the name probably about 2 or 3 years before I started the business. And I registered it because somebody called me it. And they might have chucked a swear word in there as well. But I got called a sales geek by a peer of mine. And actually, as soon as they said it, my initial visceral response was, yeah, I am. And really it came from, like I said, I wasn't very academic at school. And when I got into sales and I started, I suppose, I was in environments where I didn't have a lot of money invested in me from a sales training perspective. I worked for some great people and some great businesses, but I knew I was going to have to learn fast as a young guy to survive in those environments. So started reading and started listening to audiobooks, and I started to develop myself. And I think that then became a bit of an obsession for me, because I realized that the more of that I did, the better I got. the more I achieved, the more money I earned, and I was more valuable to the people I was working for. So I just did that relentlessly all the way through my 20s, pretty much, and obviously to the point that I left employment. And yeah, and I guess the geekery really came from this kind of like scientific approach that I'd learned from all this stuff that I've learned, and that science in sales for me is around the use of data to remove subjectivity from sales management and sales leadership, but also the use of psychology and neuroscience to understand how and why people make decisions. And I think not enough salespeople, bizarrely, actually understand how other human beings make decisions. And I think that's bonkers, personally, because that's your job.
Can you give us an example of when you had that point where you're like, I think I know enough that I can do this and teach other people? Because that for me is, when you become a trainer or when you teach
Yeah.
others, you have to have a certain level of confidence. And what was the point when you realized that that was going to be something that you were able to do?
Yeah, I think that I don't think there's like a single thing that happened. I think there was a point where and during that conversation with my friend about kind of what might I do, what might I not do, and I chucked a couple of other ideas out there. One of them actually has now become our online academy, which at the time Paul rightly said to me, unless you've got a couple of £100,000 and a year and a half worth of mortgage payments, you're not going to get that thing live. And he was absolutely right. And then I sort of said to him, well, actually, I love being a sales leader. I just don't like doing it where I'm doing it. And I'd grown up in SMEs and I'd also grown up, I didn't pin this memory at that point. It came about a year or so later, but I grew up in a household of a failed business. My dad tried to have a go and like many thousands of people do every single year, and it didn't work out. And I think what I realized at that point was I knew enough and had enough knowledge of kind of how to go to market and generate revenue that I felt that I could help people out. I tested that on a couple of friends that had businesses, and just over coffees, just kind of gave them little snippets of stuff, and they'd always come back and go, "Oh, that was bloody brilliant. Thank you very much." But having said that, I don't mind admitting that I would say for a big chunk of time, even after I'd started the business, imposter syndrome was rife in me. I really struggled with that for probably at least the first year of the business, where although I knew some stuff, I'd always put business owners up on a pedestal, and I always looked up to them, and I thought, why are they going to listen to me, right? And these guys are smart people. They got successful businesses, and here I am telling them that I'm going to show them how to do things better. And I guess once I got enough evidence of results and got enough validation from them as early clients, I kind of got over myself, but it didn't happen overnight.
It's really, I mean, imposter syndrome is, I think everyone has it to, obviously varying levels. But yeah, like you said, when you go to someone that you kind of like aspired as like, well, they know what they're doing. They've got this size business. They've been doing it for years, and I'm teaching them.
Yeah.
You're like, right, okay, I need to really be on my A game here.
Yeah.
And everyone has it, like you said, at different levels, and ultimately it comes down to that evidence, doesn't it? Like once you've done it and you can see the results and they can see the results, you then get that loop, that feedback loop that then goes, I do know what I'm doing, and this is my way of doing things, and it does
Yeah.
work, and it gives you that confidence. So just wanted to start on the money side of things. So you've got 4 months, like you said, 4 months worth of personal money to pay for the mortgage, that side of things, if that goes wrong, which is 100% completely sensible to do. But the business itself, did it start with any money? Did you get a loan? How did you start the actual business?
Yeah, no loans, no investors. So we've bootstrapped Sales Geek to where it is today. No, I guess the reality is it was a I suppose we made it a relatively low cost startup. I suppose we used some of that money to spend money on the business. We had to build a website, we had to get a logo design, we had to get business cards, there was get a phone line. There's all these things that we had to do at the beginning, which actually came out of that part. When I say we had 4 months worth of money, every penny I spent in the business was one less day or week that we could pay the mortgage. So I was sharing that pot of money with the business. So yeah, I guess that was kind of our startup fund, really. But the reality was it was paying us and simultaneously, getting a laptop and a logo and a website and doing that stuff as well. So it wasn't going to spread too far. But I think what it did was create a culture which actually to this day, nearly 8 years on, has carried on in the business, which is, um, I think you can think your way through problems rather than spending your way out of problems. And I think sometimes, I think money can make you lazy. Actually, I think having too much of it around, you can do the easy thing, but I think we didn't have it, so we had to be very creative. We had to be quite entrepreneurial in terms of doing deals with people and kind of trading what I did for the things that I needed. And I think through that first year, I worked really hard to keep whatever I had in my own bank account. And that could be anything from getting a stand at an expo and trading what I knew with the exhibition owners to do that. I got a website for it. I guess I spent the currency, which was my knowledge, rather than spending cash, because cash is slightly more mission critical, I guess, in terms of being able to
Yeah.
continue to trade. Whereas I can kind of give my knowledge away a bit more indefinitely.
I say if you run out of cash, you're done.
Yeah, yeah.
So first employee, at what stage? So like you said, you've run the business very, very finely. Trading knowledge which is completely the right thing to do at that stage. When do you take on your first employee, or do you go straight to the franchise model?
No, so we didn't franchise until we didn't properly launch the franchise model until 2021. So we were 4 years old at the point that we franchised. So we grew the business out here. I suppose at that point we were, up until COVID, quite a regional business, and I suppose at the point that we franchised, there was a team of 10 of us. We were sort of around about £1 million run rate, sort of doing 70, 80K months. And with that team of 10, we had 6 or 7 of us selling and delivering services locally, and then a couple of guys kind of in ops and marketing and finance. So no, we very much grew it out. And I suppose the first employee was interesting for us. So the first thing was, I suppose my wife joining the business. So we were a single income family at the point that decided to start the business. So Lucy agreed to go and get a part-time job. So we had some money coming in. And then I suppose 9 months into the business, I was so busy with client work that I wasn't able to stay on top of other things. So she quit that job and joined the business. At that point, it could afford to feed both of us. And then really probably about that year mark, I was already getting bored of myself. And I loved doing what I was doing. I was grateful that I managed to, sorry, someone's turned the lights off. So it's one of our guys' 50th birthdays today.
Oh,
So they've turned the lights off to the candles and the cake.
oh yeah, best not turn it back on yet.
Oh, there we go. Lights are back on again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, I think the first thing was surviving that first year or so in terms of going from employment to, sort of self-employment really. But then the appetite was, okay, want to grow a business. And yeah, I guess there was a couple of options on how to do that. And option A was to have other geeks in different parts of the country. I don't mind admitting, I dipped my toe into that, and it got fully burnt off by someone that kind of betrayed my trust a little bit. And so I recoiled from that pretty quickly, and then decided to focus locally on broadening out our services locally. So we then brought our next new geek in probably about 18 months into our journey. We diversified into sales training, and then really kind of went and grew through those two products, grew as a regional business up until COVID, really.
The trust bit that was burnt off, what was how did that happen? Like, was it because you employed them as self-employed, or they were part of the company? I'm just trying to understand from that side how it burnt, because obviously when you employ someone, in theory they should do what you ask them to do.
Yeah, so we didn't employ them. I guess we were so embryonic as a business that it was someone that I'd known for a little while, actually, in a different part of the country. And they originally reached out to me to say, "Oh, I love what you're doing, and I'm thinking about quitting my job and doing my own sales consultancy stuff." And they were just pecking my head initially, and that kind of pecking of head very quickly turned into, well, maybe I could do what you're doing, but in this other part of the country. And so that sounds great. That sounds like growth to me. And I guess really they would have been almost franchisee number one, but at that point, we didn't have the financial means to have all the contracts and have all the stuff built out. So I guess naively did it on trust. And yeah, I guess cut a long story short, they ran off into the sunset with the first client we helped them find, and then yeah, reappeared a year later trying to rip off our brand. And that was yeah, I guess lesson learned, I guess, and that's part of the journey, right? You learn stuff as you go.
Business is war without bullets, hey? That's what they say.
Yeah, yeah. Probably one of the most awkward phone calls I ever had to make in my life was that phone call. Uh, but yeah,
Yeah. Well, the thing
but
is, it's probably one of the best learning curves as well that you can have, and it's probably enabled you to, like you say, grow the business differently to how you maybe originally thought you were gonna.
oh, without a doubt. I mean, the reality is, if that would have worked, we had one product at that point in time, which was the part-time sales director service. And actually, it's now one of like 15 products. At that point, it was our strapline in our logo because that was just what we did. And yeah, I guess at that point we'd have replicated that. So what was essentially a one-man band. We'd have repeated that across the country. And actually now our franchise model is very different because we have the sort of full suite of products and services. That actually the franchise offering is very different because we launched that at a point where we had a team of 10, we we're at a higher level of revenue, we were delivering multiple products and services to our community. So what our franchisees are replicating now are very different to what would have been replicated back in 2018. So yeah, listen, I'm a great believer in kind of everything happens for a reason. And then yeah, it was, although at the time it was disappointing, um, it was great. It was actually, it helped us out on a couple of fronts. But yeah, I think sometimes some of these difficult things, but like COVID was the same for us, but those difficult things actually present you with opportunities, and you look back on them and see that actually they were a godsend really, rather than the opposite.
Just didn't feel like that at the time.
Well,
That's
it
the
doesn't
problem. That's the
often doesn't,
problem.
does it? Yeah.
Yeah. But catalyst for change often comes from that, isn't it? Adversity. So you talked about COVID. How was COVID for Sales Geek? Was that
Uh,
good?
um, wow. So COVID for Sales Geek was well, as it was for everyone else, it was a really bizarre time. So I guess so I remember sitting in the office on the day of it was the 12th of March, and it was a day of it. So in Lancashire up here, you have a big business awards every year called the Red Rose Awards. There's 1,200 people in a big room. I think it's one of the largest regional business awards, and we've been shortlisted for 3 awards, which we're really proud of. I remember sitting in the office not knowing whether this thing was going to go ahead. It did go ahead. We then won all 3 of those awards. I've got them up on the shelf just over here. We were the first. Uh, we're the first company in the 14 years I've been running it to actually go and win the hat trick on the night. It was just amazing high. It was great. We were buzzing. And we got back into the office the next day. And actually, we had a week where we were still acquiring clients despite this kind of looming issue that was starting to brew up. They'd already announced kind of like, mass gatherings were being banned. And obviously then on the 23rd, I think it was, of March, Boris told us to go home for 3 weeks. And I guess at that point, I remember being at home on that first day, and my emotions were all over the place. So I don't mind admitting it, and I'm probably going to struggle to fully contextualize this because we had all sorts of stuff going on. From me and my wife both being directors of the business with an only child at home that we were supposed to be homeschooling, but actually, we're trying to homeschool a child whilst keeping 10 people in jobs was a difficult balance to get. They're kind of our children too, and that was a difficult balance. And I remember we were having weekly cash flow meetings, and after the second one, because we'd been scaling up, so we hadn't been saving cash, we'd been investing that money back into new team members, new offices, new products and services. We'd literally just launched, well, we were just about to launch this an app that we built out. We invested a lot of money in that. So we were sat there on a relatively small amount of cash, and at that point, we didn't know how far that was going to have to stretch. So we took the decision to contact every single client rather than waiting for customers to maybe pause stuff. We took a decision as a business that it was better to know what was going to happen, the wait, and also better to go first and extend the olive branch. So me and my wife Lucy sat in our home office, and in about 2.5 days, we're off 75% of our income,
Wow.
which
Okay.
was a little bit scary at that point. We had to furlough a couple of guys. There's only 2 guys we could furlough because we still had clients to serve. And then there was this kind of like 6-week period, maybe 6 or 8 week period, where it was just this weird black hole of no one really knew what was going on, as in the market generally. And we filled that up with helping people out. We did lots of pro bono stuff. We were running free online events for salespeople that were at home and furloughed and business owners, and just trying to help where we could help and just be good human beings, right? And service the customers that we were helping before, plus lots of new audience. But also during that time, we in the February, we'd also talked about exploring franchising. And
Okay.
I've often said that if COVID hadn't happened, we'd still be talking about exploring. Because the world just stopped, and we were like, "Oh, right. Well, a lot of the brain cells that we required to make that happen are currently giving their brain cells to customers, and now we're doing a little bit of that, a little bit less of that for a period of time. Maybe it's the opportunity, but there's a cost to it, and we didn't have much cash, and I think I remember being on a call one afternoon with James, who's one of the directors here, and that conversation was, you know, to spend that money now would be insane because that's our survival fund. But something in me says not spending that money now and not taking this opportunity to build this stuff out now is probably even more insane. And I guess we kind of hedged our bets that, in a world that doesn't treat its sales leaders particularly well, they're probably going to treat them even less well through a pandemic. And if we could get this thing up and running and available to people by the end of the year, might we have some more people in the market that want to explore a franchise rather than taking on another sales leadership role? So I guess we spent the survival fund on building out the franchise model, and we rolled the dice, and it was a gamble, but it also wasn't at the same time because we couldn't survive indefinitely anyway. So if this thing had gone long enough, whether we'd spent the money or not, we'd be out of business. So we might as well go
Yeah.
down swinging. So we decided to go down swinging.
That shows the bravery, though. Like you say, it was an educated decision. You'd already thought about it for maybe a long time, but COVID actually made you stop and go, we've got to do this, and this is our way out of this problem. Even if it's going to cost the business, we've got to give it a go. And that's what makes a true entrepreneur, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a really weird time. I suppose probably some people think we would have debated that for a really long time, had lots of board meetings and kind of got together, and it wasn't. It was just a bit of a, let's just do it. Just go. Yeah. Like now, and do you know what? Like the crazy thing was after, from I suppose that third week of March, you went into lockdown through to probably around the first week of May. So maybe about a 6-week period. Yeah, the world just stopped, and everyone's doing online pub quizzes and doing all that stuff through COVID. The weather was amazing. And that was, it was, although I've got fond memories of it kind of now because it facilitated that opportunity. I remember when we went back into the lockdown in the January, February, we were walking into my home office and I ripped the desk out and refused to work from there because as soon as I walked in, all that emotion of like that hot April, listening to my neighbors who were on furlough playing with their kids in the garden whilst me and Lucy were trying to keep a business afloat whilst not home educating our own child, and it was, so there's still some of those scars there, but I think they always say that adversity kind of creates great businesses, and I think we definitely got better as a result. We created this new model. And, we were trying to unlock this. How do we had this mission to change the way the world perceives sales, but the reality was we were barely changing the way that Lancashire perceived sales at that point. And how do we get to that next tier of growth? And franchising was absolutely the right thing to do. And, but it's not straightforward. There's operations manuals and contracts and commercial models and all the stuff to go and build out. And, we did that in that 6 weeks. And then literally about the second week of May, the whole world went, or the whole of the UK went, holy cow, like we can't just mothball ourselves. We need to go and sell. And we went from furloughing a couple of guys to actually hiring people in the space of about 4 weeks. And it just went like, and we went from like losing 75% of our income to then doubling our turnover for the whole year. It was just a weird, and like this atom bomb went off in about May time, 2020. And I guess it's never stopped really.
It's those pivotal moments that change businesses as well, isn't it? Like you said, you've changed them in that short window. You've changed the model. Demand's exploded. You've gone from where am I going to get my next client from to I've got too many overnight. Just completely changed. So if we move on to coming out of COVID, you've started the franchise model. Does it work straight away?
No. Well, no. I mean, I think. Did it work straight away? Do you know what? Actually, in some respects, it did actually, because we had our first couple of willing volunteers to come and test this thing that made sense on paper, but we had to prove that it made sense in the real world. And actually, those first couple of guys, did well because we had a surplus of opportunity here, so we were able to feed our first couple of guys. And actually, what I did is we give it. That's quite false because when you get to a point, you've got 30, 40, 50 franchises, you can't feed them. They have to be self-sustaining. So I think the measuring our success on those first couple that we're able to feed stuff to was a dangerous thing. Because what we needed to do was hire more self-sufficient franchisees that could come in. And actually, our first two guys retrospectively failed. They're not here anymore. But the guys that joined them straight afterwards are. All of those guys are still here. But no, I think we realized quite quickly that in terms of as long as we made sure we recruited the right people, that we could maintain quality of service to our customers. And so that side of it, in terms of delivery of service to clients, has been I think when we were sitting down debating pros and cons to it before we did it, one of our biggest concerns was quality control, and actually that hasn't been an issue. And we've put measures in place to make sure, but that hasn't been an issue. I think that the biggest challenge we've had, two biggest challenges, is onboarding new franchisees and helping them transition from maybe 20, 30 years of employment to now running their own business. But the biggest challenge I would suggest was actually then taking, we had a team internally here of 13 or 14 people, and actually, materially, those roles of those people we're going to have to change. And 3 years ago, 3/4 of that workforce was selling and delivering services. We don't need that anymore at HQ. We don't do that ourselves. So having to take a group of people here on a real transition from a delivery model to servicing the people that are doing the delivery has been quite a big challenge. And we've now done that. We don't do any delivery ourselves anymore. And this whole team here is geared up to support our franchisees both in the UK and US and India and Middle East. And but that's been tough. We've lost some people through that process because they came in to do a job that wasn't there anymore. We've also had some people that have taken the opportunity to really progress their career as a result of that change as well. And I guess that's probably not uncommon.
Yeah. How have you grown through that process?
Had hair. Yeah, probably put on a couple of pounds and lost a few follicles, but yeah, it's so much learning. And it's one of our values here at Sales Geek. One of them are geeks are brave. We talked about bravery earlier, but also geeks are always learning. And I think, COVID, I learned a lot. I think about myself, about the people around me, and about human behavior, I guess, in a crisis, which was great. And then obviously through the franchising model, now doing that internationally, learned a ton. And I think I became acutely aware in 2020 that I'd probably let a lot of that pressure get on top of me. I remember it was probably around September, October time, and my resting heart rate was probably about 20 beats per minute higher than it is now. And I'd not really looked after myself. I'd sort of drifted away from my sports and was so consumed in the business and just helping it survive, really, that I definitely put myself at the back of the queue. And so actually, the thing that helped me the most actually was I joined sort of a peer group organization called Vistage, which I joined I think 4 years ago now. I've been in it for 4 years and just been around other chief execs and having sort of the mentorship of the chair of that group. Absolute game changer for me, that. But also I think at the same time, on my first meeting, there were online meetings initially because we were still in the COVID era. We had a really good speaker, a guy called Brad Waldron, who represents Stephen Covey in the UK for the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and the 7th habit is sharpening the axe. And he said something really profound on that call, which was that at some point we're all going to get a health invoice for what we've done to ourselves through our life, and we're going to get one. The 2 things we can control is when we get it and how big it is. And I kind of, I suppose, stared at myself in the mirror after that and thought, yeah, I'm racking up an invoice here. So I actually literally got my trainers out, went for a run the next day, and subsequently since then I've run the London Marathon, I've run ultra marathons, and I kind of keep myself physically and mentally kind of in shape so that I can deal with the challenges of running a business, which is varied and difficult at times.
I think that's that health invoice is something I've never heard of before. What a great saying, because it is 100% what happens. You look in the mirror, you suddenly look around at the year and you go, I had all these plans to get healthier, to stop
Yeah.
doing what I've been doing for the last few years, and unfortunately nothing's changed. And that catalyst, incredible. Ultra marathons as well. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
Uh,
this year. I did my first one in September this year. It was, up in the Lake District with quite a few mountains thrown in, which was fun. And, but again, I think that for me, it goes back to those sort of limiting self-beliefs that we touched on earlier, into the things that get in the way of starting a business. Same things that get in the way of doing something like that. And I had quite a few reasons to not run long distances. So I had my right lung removed nearly 17 years ago now. And, I definitely put myself in the box of, I'd watch the marathon on TV. Oh, that's great, and well done to those people. But being a sort of a short, stocky ex-rugby player with one lung, had lots of reasons to not go and do it. And one day actually, I was listening to a book which kind of just inspired me to get out of my own way and stop putting myself in the pigeonhole that I had.
that's brilliant. Well, congrats to you. That is a fantastic achievement, especially with one lung as well. That's incredible. So let's go to, when we started this conversation, you said 15 months ago, if you'd have, had this podcast now, would have been a UK only company.
Yeah.
If we could talk about what inspired the move internationally, and obviously how it's gone. Because if I just follow that, because most people do like one country, right? Like, let's do the US. They don't do like, let's do the US, India, etc., etc.
Yeah. Well, I say we have this mission statement, change the way the world, and we kind of underline the world, change the way the world perceives sales. So I guess we kind of had to do it. We were duty bound. We'd had that. I suppose we created that mission statement about a year into the journey, and everyone that had joined the business or become a customer of the business or part of our wider community had subscribed to that. But sales is a bit of a dirty word. It gets overcomplicated by people trying to sell books quite often in our world, and we want to make it more simple for business owners and salespeople alike, and put a bit of pride back in the profession. So we wanted to do that. And as I'm glancing up now, as it's written above the wall over there, but yeah, we couldn't only stay in the UK because we'd written it on the wall, right? Once you've written it on the wall, you've got to see it through. So we started so I guess US was always sort of first on our list after the UK for a number of reasons. One was, it's a big place, lots of opportunity, but also I guess the kind of the inner rebel in us kind of felt like our space, the sales training, sales consultancy space, is dominated by American brands. I guess a bit like the Sex Pistols, there was a little part of it that kind of wanted to sort of grab hold of the Union Jack and take it back the other way, and share a little bit of how we do things back the other way. So that was always kind of in our stomachs. We wanted to go and do that. It's hard. The US is a very litigious country. So actually to get to the point that we could even have a conversation with somebody about becoming franchisee number one was probably a good 10 months of legal stuff, contracts, variations to contracts, FDDs, all sorts of stuff, just to be compliant, and tens and tens and tens and tens of thousands of pounds in the process, just to get to the point that we could actually jump on a Zoom call and have a chat with somebody about maybe being geek number one over there. So that was hard. We again, I think people will look at it from the outside and go, "Oh, you launched in the US and you're in 14 states in just over a year, and well done you." The bit they don't see is for 5 months at the start of the process, me, Lucy, and James were giving up 2 to 3 evenings a week from probably 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. back-to-back Zoom calls, and after 5 months, we had nothing to show for it. We had a single person say, "Yeah, come on then, I'm gonna be the first guy." And then a very good gentleman by the name of Joe Heikkinen in Dallas was the first guy to break rank. He was geek number one in the US in the state of Texas. He owns the master franchise for the state of Texas, and crowds create crowds, right? And then we knew if we could get those first 2, 3, 4 guys across the line, that it would just get easier. So, and it is. I look at the guys now that are onboarding. Our rate of acquisition is up. But what's more importantly, the speed in which those guys are going home and finding customers is up as well, which is exciting too. And that just fuels I guess the energy in here, fuels the energy within the US team, and yeah, I guess the plan was to double down on that for a bit, and then we got approached by we got approached by an organization in India. Um, well, probably around this time last year, they'd already had a good few months of trying to get hold of us, and we'd kind of just, well, I'd kept it at arm's length just because we were focused on the US, and then in March, we were in a board meeting and we were talking about, maybe do we want to plant some flags in some other countries this year, and what would that look like, and what regions economically are exciting. So we started talking about the BRICS region. So you can look at Brazil and India and Africa. And I just sort of innocently in our meeting said, "Oh, yeah, some dudes in India have been sort of trying to get a hold of me for a bit. They're quite interested in taking a brand to India," but I'd kind of like kept it at arm's length. And then like a domino rally around the room, everyone else went, "Oh yeah, they've been trying to get hold of me as well." And these guys had a really proper concerted attempt to get hold of it. So I said, like, I'll take the action. Let me set up a call with them. Jumped on this call with this amazing guy called Sachin, who's based in Delhi. And they'd been tracking us for ages. And they already had a portfolio of brands that are perfectly sized Sales Geek app to fit into that. And so, like, we really want to bring you guys here. And I met the chairman the following month, and then a month after that, I was on an exhibition stand in Delhi, launching the brand. And yeah, I guess there was an opportunity there, and I think where we got to was, what's the cost of not doing this? And the safe thing would be to just leave it for another year or so, by which point they might have found another brand or something else might have changed, and we wouldn't be doing it. And yeah, I guess sometimes fun things can happen when you say yes, and just go with it.
There's never a perfect time, is there? You just got to say yes.
Yeah, 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 and then hold on. Yeah, I think sometimes we is it one of my favorite quotes by a guy. You ever come across a guy called Ross Edgley?
I think so. Yeah, I
So
think
he's a
so.
guy. He's a guy that swam around Great Britain. Took him 5.5 months. He's not built like a swimmer either. And in his when he kind of set foot back on land in Margate afterwards, and someone put a microphone in his mouth, he came up with this quote, which I still have in my home office. I've had it since the day I started the business. It says, "Sometimes in life you've got to be naive enough to start and stubborn enough to finish." And I think I find myself now saying to people, like, embrace the naivety. Like, don't feel like you
Yeah,
need to understand every last little thing about the opportunity before you go and do it. Otherwise, the opportunity's gone. And then once you're there, get stubborn and hang on.
yeah. That's a great analogy for business, I think, because that is often what it is, isn't it? It's, you don't fail unless you quit, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, exactly.
So
And
you're in,
sometimes, as I say, sometimes you do need to know when to quit. But yeah, no, you're right. I think just hanging on sometimes and writing it out is the right thing to do.
This podcast is sponsored by Team Building Experiences. If you're planning a team building event, away day, or corporate event, then check out team-building-experiences.co.uk and state podcast 15 in the comments to receive 15% off your proposal. So you're in India, you're in the US.
Yeah.
Where else are you?
So we're in the GCC as well now. So across obviously like Dubai, Saudi, Abu Dhabi, Oman, etc. And there's some ongoing conversations currently for conversations in Canada, in Southeast Asia, Australia. So really, we see. I suppose we're kind of recording this at the end of 2024. I guess as I look forward into 2025, I think realistically, just based on the conversations we already have ongoing, we should be in probably 4 or 5 additional countries by the time we get to the end of 2025.
Wow. That is good growth, really good growth. So I've got a question I wanted to ask, and it was something that you put off air where we discussed about this platform that you built, this sales training platform.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, we talked a little bit about quitting or failing. I love to fail. You have to fail, like you say sometimes. Tell me about that platform that you built.
Yeah. So like I said earlier, it was when I was sort of sat in the coffee shop planning my future. It was my first idea actually for Sales Geek. I really felt like there was no community for salespeople. It's quite a lonely job, certainly if you're field based. But also, I've come across a stat already that 86% of companies don't train their salespeople beyond product training. So I felt like, wouldn't it be great if we could make sales training or sales education like more accessible to individuals as well as companies and organizations? Because the way the model works currently is that the business pays for the sales training and then the salespeople go through it. And wants to create a model where smaller companies, but also individual salespeople could access sales training whilst building a global community of people that can engage with each other, share their challenges, solve each other's problems, etc. Made a lot of sense. Everyone thought it made a lot of sense. So again, we saved up cash internally from the profit we were making in that year, and went and built it, and built that as native apps on App Store and Android, and went full beans at it. And it was a low barrier to entry. We were trying to price that at like 10 to 20 bucks a month. It's a sort of less than gym membership. Every single person we spoke to was like, "Oh, it's bloody brilliant. It's going to fly." We kind of pinned off. This is like before franchise was even on the table. And that was our future. That was how we were going to go and change the way the world perceives sales through that platform. It was our future. All of our planning, all of our business planning, all of our everything was geared towards that thing. Didn't work. It just didn't work. And I reckon probably somewhere close to £250,000 into
Wow.
it from the
Yeah.
technology, but not just technology, but there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of content in that platform. And when I say it didn't work in the way we thought it would, but it's still very much part of our suite of services and has had value in very, very different ways. And I think that's the sort of the learning for me, as being, just because that initial thing didn't work out, we persevered with it for a bit, but at some point, like it's not tea leaves, it's data, and the data has to kind of like tell you a story. And getting people on that as a paid version to this thing as individuals just wasn't going to work. So we made it free. We made most of it free, actually, to those individuals and those small businesses. And then we have a paid for version of it, which is still super affordable, with a high level of training in that. And it's often the companies that are investing in the paid version, and we've now got thousands or tens of thousands of people in the free version, and they're just people that we want to help. We want to provide I suppose we believe that sales education is a right, not a privilege, and that's kind of our way of getting that into people. But yeah, if somebody was said to me 4 years ago, "You're going to spend this money, and it isn't going to be this, it's going to be that," I probably wouldn't have done it. But actually, that would have been a shame, because we'd be worse off for it, because actually, it's helped a bunch of individuals that are in it, and are in it for free, which I love. But also some of the big global accounts that we've won over the last 2 or 3 years. There's a little business from Blackburn, and we've worked with some of the biggest sales employees in the world. And part of their reason for choosing us, other than the fact we do things differently, was the fact we had this on-demand platform that their learners could dial into, as well as the live training. So in a weird way, it's been successful, but not in the way that we built it
Yeah.
for.
So lifetime value, I imagine it's actually got a huge potential, absolutely huge potential, with all those customers that are, like you say, using the free app, because that's the barrier to entry, isn't it? Once they start using it, they like it, they then want to pay for more, and
Yes.
that's the route in. So, like you say, it didn't work how you thought it was going to work, but you can class that as a failing on a probably mission, like what we're actually trying to do. But however, it's completely reverted to something that potentially is a massive sales tool, or is a massive sales tool.
Yeah. I remember sitting in a meeting room planning before we'd sort of hit the go button. And I remember then, I can vividly remember now, some of the goals that we wrote down. Sort of the big, hairy, audacious goal was a million users paying like £15 a month or whatever. And isn't this going to be an amazing business? And yeah, it's definitely not that. But it has helped us grow. And even the acquisition of like master franchises, the fact they have that to go and take to market, has meant that it's helped us acquire franchisees and master franchisees, because we have it as within our product set to take to market. So yeah, it's we found different ways to get value from it, and give value through it. But yeah, it definitely didn't go to plan.
Didn't end up how you thought it was, but it's going to work out in the end. And that's the thing with doing it, isn't it? It's just saying yes,
Yeah.
like we go back to. Richard, it's been a fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed today. Can you tell me a little bit more about Sales Geek and the future of where Sales Geek is going?
Yeah, so I guess in many respects, I think we've, over our first nearly 8 years in business, we've kind of morphed and found different form factors to kind of figure out how do we go and deliver on this mission to change the way the world perceives sales. And I think now we're in a position where we actually really know what that looks like, through the franchise model, having master franchisees and franchisees in various regions around the world. So really, the plan for the next 5 years to 2030 is to be in at least 30 regions. And we feel like
Yeah.
if we're in 30 regions, and each of those regions has an average of 30 to 50 franchisees, then we have the capacity to be helping 1 million businesses. And more importantly, by having geeks in each of those business communities, we are making what we do more accessible to the very people that we serve.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a fantastic journey from here on in. And yeah, I'm really excited to kind of track your progress. And it'd be good to kind of catch up, I think, in a few years and see how that's gone. If I could just finish today, Richard, with one question. It is, if you were to start a business today, what advice would you give to someone looking to start that business?
My 4 favorite initials are JFDI. I won't spell those out live on air, but 3 of them are just do it. I think our inner conscious is quite helpful at keeping us alive, and it helps us survive. But I think it also gets in the way sometimes. And I think there's a point in time where you just got to back yourself and have a go. And do you know what? It might not work. You might end up as a stat, but I think so many people that you hear about, certainly as they get older in life, or that kind of cliche thing, if you kind of regret the things that you didn't do rather than the things that you did do. And the more people I've spoken to, the more true I realize that to be. And I think, just don't be that person that sits in a coffee shop at 60 and says, oh yeah, I had this really good idea once and I never did it. Like, just go and find out whether it's going to work or not. And I know I understand and fully appreciate there can be consequences to that thing not working. So be semi-responsible in your approach. But my general feeling is, Daniel, is we are all far more capable than what we think we are. And sometimes you got to go and find it out.
That's great advice. And I love the idea of just doing it. And I love how you've just done it over the last 8 years and before then when you started at Sales Geek. Richard, where can people find more information about you?
So I guess probably my native habitat outside of the Sales Geek bunker here is probably LinkedIn. So, kind of look me up on LinkedIn. It'd be great to connect with people, great to follow their journeys, as well as sort of continue to share ours.
Lovely. Well, we'll put all those details in the show notes as well as the link to the Sales Geek website. But Richard, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today.
That's been great fun. Thanks for having me.
So if you enjoyed the podcast today, if you could do one thing for me, if you could like, follow or subscribe to the channel on your podcast listening app, enables us to grow the show. Thank you.